welcome to the interview series entitled From Suffering to Success. I'm your host, Michael Hart. This podcast series is a forum for sharing our own stories of struggle and ultimately success in spite of learning challenges like dyslexia. Now, in my first few interviews I did for this series, I focused on adults with dyslexia who had succeeded incredibly against amazing odds. And it's extremely clear to me that people with dyslexia need to hear these stories. I've learned that it really does provide a great sense of hope. But what I've also learned over the years is that parents with kids who struggle with learning issues have extraordinary tales to tell themselves. And I want to use this platform to get those stories out. It's important for us to know that we are not alone, and we need to know that we're part of a large community. My guest today is Lisa Rose. Welcome, Lisa. Thanks for being here.
It's great to be here.
Good. So let me tell my listeners what I found amazing about Lisa Rose here. Now, Lisa's a college-educated mom with 3 kids, all of whom have struggled with learning issues. Over the years, she's become what she describes as a, quote, fierce advocate, unquote, for her kids. But what I really want to point out is that this is not in a sense of a bull in a china shop, but more like what I would think I'd call an enlightened warrior. And we'll talk about that more a little bit later. But in a nutshell, I've asked Lisa on today because I'd say that Lisa is a poster woman for successfully navigating parenthood of children with learning problems, with consciousness and tenacity. Now, that alone is quite a story to tell, but there's actually another whole piece to this that I found really compelling. Lisa has written the most beautiful and poignant novel about a girl in middle school who has dyslexia. And I've never, it's just absolutely beautiful. The name of the book is You've Got Verve, Jamie Ireland. It's a story about a 10-year-old girl named Jamie. And it's an excellent tale about the whole process from suffering to success. And Lisa Rose does a beautiful job capturing that whole journey from confusion and anger to relief and a sense of hope about the future. It's just beautifully done. So let me stop there for a second. Now, Lisa, where can we purchase your book?
The book is available on Amazon, and probably by the time this podcast airs, hopefully the Kindle version will be available too. So you could just go on Amazon and Google You've Got Verve, Jamie Ireland, and it should pop up.
That's really lovely. Now, it's just up there really, really recently, right? So it's just starting sales now?
It is. The book was published on Pi Day, and when your listeners read this book, they'll understand why that was a very significant day for Jamie Ireland to have her story come out into the world.
That's super cool. All right, now, we're going to get back to your book in a few minutes, but we want to hear your story. So let's start at the beginning. You had what I think is a classic experience with your oldest son that will resonate with a lot of people that are listening. Tell us when you first noticed a problem and what the first couple of years of school were like for your oldest son.
Well, actually, the first problem I noticed, Dr. Hart, was that my son's eye was turning in when he was about 18 months old. And I brought him to the doctor right away because we didn't know what was going on. It happened so suddenly. It's a good story. It turned out that it was strabismus. But my son's pediatrician gave me some great advice at that time. And he said, I always listen to the mothers. The mothers and the fathers have such good intuition. And so he said, that's why I didn't get nervous about the possibility that it could have been a tumor. But it turned out to be strabismus. So that was the first thing that happened. But my son was very verbal, very early on. He spoke really early. And so I just thought he was such a brilliant kid. And then it was really in kindergarten, actually pre-kindergarten where we lived, they did, every 4-year-old had a preschool screening. And I wish every community did this because I think it can flush out a lot of uh, learning challenges early on. And what the school picked up on was the fact that he had a little bit of a speech impediment. And they put him into the pre-K, just, it was a one-on-one speech therapy. So that's how the first problem that arose. And early on, the preschool teachers always said to me that, oh, he's the type of child that he'll just have a few small, close friends, and that will be it. He won't be the most popular kid in school. I think what those preschool teachers were trying to articulate to me in so many words was the fact that my son has a nonverbal learning disability. And what that is, and maybe you could speak more a little bit about this, it sort of presents as an Asperger type kid or a child, but not entirely.
It's quite complicated. You got a complicated little guy there.
So the teachers thought, once he entered into kindergarten, they said, oh, well, he's very smart and he really understands things. For example, he had show and tell, and they said, the teacher told me, she said, yeah, he brought a silver coin into school and he was explaining to the other children if they took 16 of these coins and put them together, they would get £1. Well, that went over most 5-year-olds' heads. And so I think, again, what that teacher was trying to show me was that he was smart, but kids didn't really get him. Again, that nonverbal learning disability coming in. But it really wasn't until he got into about second grade that I started to see issues that I just didn't think were normal. And his handwriting was very messy. And people used to say, oh, well, he's so smart. I bet he'll grow up and be a doctor because he already has the doctor's handwriting being messy. So at that point, my younger son had entered kindergarten. And so I just decided to get my older son tested. And nobody in the public school wanted to test him. They said, oh, he's normal, he's fine, everything's good. But as a mother, and going back to my pediatrician, I listened to that lesson he told me about trusting my intuition. So I had him privately tested, and that was not cheap. I forego the Disney vacation that we had planned so that I could, in fact, pay for the testing.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Now, when you had that early disconnect from the school, a lot of parents in your position be pretty upset, and their tendency is to become much more adversarial in terms of how they interacted with the school. And what led you to do the opposite and actually engage more deeply with the school and build better relationships with the teachers and the staff? What do you think is it about you that caused you to respond that way, as opposed to just, getting into a bitter battle about what's really going on with your son?
Well, I think it all does go back to my mom. She's of Irish descent, and I don't know, the little leprechauns that are always looking for the rainbows, but that's kind of my mom's attitude, is always look for the rainbows, even in the worst situations. So that's been kind of my life mantra. So even though this was a bad situation, I wanted to make it better. And I thought, if I go in there and I look for the rainbows, look for the good, I can make this situation into a better situation. So, I was lucky with my son's teacher. She didn't know and he has a lot of diagnoses, but I'll just speak about dysgraphia within this. She didn't know what dysgraphia was. So this is the early infancy of being able to get on your home computer and research. And I love to research. So got on the computer and did a lot of research and printed off, reams and sheets of paper about dysgraphia. And I brought it into her and shared it with her. And she was very open. She was a younger teacher. And so she was very open about learning about it. it wasn't that she wanted to fight about it. She just didn't have an awareness of it. And I guess that was my first exposure. I thought all teachers would understand what all these learning disabilities were. But unfortunately, I don't think, at least back then in the education process for educating teachers, they touch a whole lot about learning disabilities. I think it's just something they teach inside one class. And so it goes really fast. There's not enough time to explore. So I would like to see a movement in this country that would be its own class, just studying learning disabilities as part of the curriculum for educating teachers.
Actually, there should be a series of classes, but it's quite fascinating that you essentially became a source of guidance for them, almost like a mentor. Now, there's two lessons in here for me. One, you had a supportive physician who was respectful and listened to you. And that is something that I pound away on when I talk to people about building the village of support, so to speak, that they need for their family. And the other thing is that you had an interesting family experience that informed how you as an adult approached problems, which I think is a really, really critical point as well. So to me, when I think about it, I go, well, what was about you that led you to become an enlightened warrior? It's almost like there was some reserves in place for you and some environmental pieces in place for you that allowed you to respond in a positive way as opposed to becoming more adversarial and getting burned out. Is that fair to say?
That is fair to say. And I will also say that I have encountered along the way my fair share of awesome teachers. And those were the teachers that I just decided that if I went into their classrooms and volunteered and helped them in any way I could, that I was going to build up a relationship with them based on a positive exchange. And so if I could come in and be helpful to them and free them up from doing some maybe more menial things and could free them up so that they could be the awesome teachers that they wanted to be, that everybody would win. They would serve my child better, and I would also be helping in the community. So I just took that approach. Now, I also had my fair share of teachers along the way that closed the parent out of the classroom. That should be a red flag, I would say, definitely, to anybody that has elementary school age children. If the teacher is closing you out of the classroom, you have to ask yourself why. Why wouldn't they want the parents in the classroom helping out? So that when I encountered that, I usually found those were the teachers that weren't as willing to help my son along the way.
So what did you do instead? What did you do during those difficult years?
Well, I tried to get in there as much as I could, but this one particular teacher just shut me out, and I just had to wait out that year. I know a lot of people probably would have put in to transfer, but I did not. Now, I will say, for part of my kids' education, they were in a year-round school. So I had this really wonderful setup where they went to school for 9 weeks, and then they were out for 3 or 4. So during those 3 or 4 weeks, I would do my own enrichment programs with them and tailor them. And I got together with other moms. We would coordinate a big group of us so that they would offer a park, like at the park district, they'd offer a class on bugs or something like that as an enrichment. So I was fortunate in that situation to be able to do my own interventions and my own teaching outside of the classroom. It was sort of like the best of both worlds between being a homeschool child and having the experience of being in a public school.
That is really fantastic, Lisa. I couldn't have scripted that better, quite frankly. So all these years go by. Your son's now, I understand, in college. Tell us how he's doing now.
Well, it's a mixed tale. So he because of his, being very smart, did excellent on the SATs, and he was always a good student, very driven to do academically well. So he got into a really nice university that a lot of people can't get into. So he was lucky, and the first year he made the dean's list, and I was the proudest mom in the world. And he was a psychology major, and his goal was to, especially freshman year, was to go to college, get out, get his PhD, and he wanted to become a college professor, just like his grandfather. And so anyhow, that was all very exciting and very good. But the further along in the program he got, the more disillusioned he became. And so last year, when he was a junior, he was talking about dropping out. This broke my husband's and my heart. We tried to advocate for him. We went to the university. We met with this dean and that dean. And the problem about a big university is you just become a number. And when you have a learning disability, it's very easy to fall through the cracks at a big university. And that's essentially what's happened to my son. And so last semester, his first semester of senior year, he was so unhappy he did not go back to college at where he goes to school, but instead did online classes and lived at home. And then this semester came, and he was supposed to sign up for his classes, and he was still going to he could do some more online classes. With the promise that he would go back to the university and finish up his degree in the summertime, but he didn't sign up for those classes. So right now, he's a senior in college with 5 classes left, and I guess he's sort of a dropout right now. And it breaks my heart, and I pray every day that he'll go back to college. But I also have to respect what he's doing now. And he started his own business from his dorm room.
Mm-hmm. So lots of lessons in there. My goodness. Flexibility. The lesson that no matter how hard you try, you get really close to the end of the tunnel. You see the light. And then there's another possibility there where things could kind of get off the rails for a little while. And you got to figure out how to reorganize and get back on the rails. Now, I wonder if he's been informed, his decisions have been informed at all about so much discussion in the press about kids who just don't feel plugged in universities, who want to be entrepreneurs. And, they're reading a lot about Mark Zuckerberg and Bill Gates,
Exactly.
You got to understand, after, those 2 guys, and then there's 50,000 guys that, don't end up as Mark Zuckerberg and Bill Gates. But
yeah, it's a greater possibility that you won't be a Mark Zuckerberg than you will be.
Is this a real business for him? Is this something that he could grow and make himself happy doing?
It is. And so I have to weigh that against his miserableness at university. And with only 5 classes left, maybe he will go back, but we'll see. We'll have to see. But he started his business in the dorm room, and it's interesting because he loves to read. One of my early rules for my children was when my oldest hit kindergarten, I turned off the TV. So Monday through Thursday, I didn't allow the TV on. So that provided for my children to make other choices to do with their time. And so my oldest is so well read. He's a voracious reader. And that's really neat because, especially with the learning disability, he figured out for himself if he's an audio learner. So he downloads all kinds of books on audio, and he'll listen to them, and he'll listen to both sides of the argument. So he spends a lot of times in bookstores as well. So one day he's in the university bookstore, and he sees 100 books for sale for $1 each. So he says, he pulls out his smartphone and he looks up, this book is selling on the internet for $89.
Oh, I
So
know
he
this
bought
guy.
the whole lot of 100 books. It cost him $100, and he started selling books out of his dorm room.
Uh,
So that's how he got his business going.
That's great. That's a great idea. I've seen that before. Now, I want to get to the book, but I know that you've also raised two more kids with learning issues. Let's just briefly did you find the experience any harder or any easier than the first time around with your son?
Yeah, so you learn from your mistakes, right? So with my second son, he was not as academically motivated. So what happened was at the end of seventh grade, he completely came unglued. And so we pulled him out of the public school and moved him into a school. And we knew this was going to be for a short course because it was more of a remedial situation. But we moved him into a school. We hired an educational consultant to help us with this plan. And we moved it. She helped us find the right school for him. We moved him into the school that was set up just for ADHD, ADD, and children with learning disabilities. So he received intensive Orton Gillingham
Mm-hmm.
educational basis. That was their whole school was based on the Orton Gillingham method. So that really brought him up to speed. Those 2 years that he invested his school career at that school helped him prepare then to move to another school. We didn't move him back to the public school. It was too big of an arena for him. So we moved him to a little private school where he finished off he went there from sophomore to senior year. And so learning from the mistake of the big university, we decided it would be better if he go to a small college. So that's where he goes, and they are fabulous. They have a learning center. They help with paper writing, any kind of learning issue that a child might have. They really, really cater to that. And he's down at Flagler College in St. Augustine, Florida, and I cannot recommend that school highly enough for just total nurturing of a child with a learning disability. It's fabulous.
Well, not to beat a dead horse, but I mean, I think in terms of I know in our previous conversations, you've read my 5-part program called From Suffering to Success, Your Child Restored. And one of the things I talk about a lot is the parents really need to think outside the box and develop a village around our kids in ways that allow them to get the support that they need. And it sounds like you did a really wonderful job with that. And so congratulations to you. Just briefly, let's touch on your daughter and then we're going to move into the book.
Yes. Okay, yeah. So my daughter is in high school, and she was, as you probably remember, middle school is just a bear. It doesn't matter if you're a quote unquote normal kid, which there is no such thing, or you're, my daughter. And so after middle school, she was completely done and she wanted to start anew. So it made sense for her to move to the school my son was at. Plus, they got to have that little camaraderie of he was a senior, she was a freshman. And she's just flourished in this smaller school. She's, in charge of the yearbook. She plays all the sports. But I have a confession to make. My daughter, I never had her tested until just recently. I knew she had a learning disability, and even at the public school, they didn't want to test her again, same story.
Uh-huh.
But what I did to advocate for her was I got to be friends with the learning disability teacher. And so what she did was she pulled her out at lunch sometimes because she more struggles with math, so about twice a week, and she would just do this on her own. It wasn't any part of any plan. I hope I don't get her in trouble. I'm not saying her name, but she just worked one-on-one with my daughter with math. And to this day, I think my daughter has developed this work ethic because of that relationship that teacher had with her and helped her believe in herself and gain some confidence.
That's fascinating. I will tell you that from a professional perspective, 80% of the kids that professionals see for testing usually have issues with reading, writing, and spelling because the language processing is such a core issue. Now, of course, language processing has a lot to do with math and understanding math as well because it's rule governed. But when it comes down to testing, it's much more difficult, and you have to be much more skilled to know what tests to give and how to interpret the results in a way that will lead you to a good remediation plan. So I think your intuition not to have her tested may have been well, it worked out fine for you because you just found the resources you needed, but you may have gone through that whole process and still not come up with much in the way of value after spending all that money in terms of, well, what do we do when the child's brain is wired like this and she has problems with math? So I think that was a lucky, probably a smart, intuitive, lucky move on your part, I would say. So
Well,
it's good.
thank you for that. And I do think it goes back to that original pediatrician that I had that gave me that wonderful advice.
Mm.
Trust your gut.
Mm.
You're the mom, you know your child better than anybody else.
That's fantastic. Mm. Okay, now let's I'll tell the listeners that you and I met through Twitter, correct? I think it was. Wasn't it Twitter or Facebook, or how did we meet? You found me somehow. You reached
Twitter.
out to me, and you told me about this book that you wrote. You've Got Verve, Jamie Ireland, and I started reading it, and I couldn't stop. I was just so impressed with how so much of the internal struggle for a young person with learning issues or an adult with learning issues is the whole deal of confusion and shame. And that oftentimes for a lot of us who don't get the care that we need, we carry that confusion and shame with us for most, if not all, of our adult life. And I was just so impressed with how you so effectively created Jamie's internal dialogue in the book, particularly around confusion and shame. Now, how did you do that? How did you make that happen? How did you write that? Does that make sense?
It does make sense. I think that the old adage, write what you know, was just what I did. I just started to write what I knew of what I observed from my own children, and also the time that I got to spend in the classroom with other children, which as a mom helper in the classroom, it helped me shape the character. Plus, I've always loved to write, so it's something I've just organically always done. And so I like to eavesdrop in coffee shops too. It's fun to go after school when the moms are coming in with the kids and listen to their conversations. And then I just write down what I hear. And so just being a good observer, I think, helped me shape my character.
Well, that part to me was really compelling. And I think another part of the book that was really compelling, that really resonated with me, and I think that's one of the reasons why I wanted to interview you. And I don't have any grandiose ideas about my depth and reach out into the market yet, but I want to get this out to as many people as possible, because there's another critical component in the book where I don't think I'm saying too much, that Jamie is unfairly suspended from school. And for many kids in real life, if there've been rejection and failure and misunderstanding and this kind of confusing sense of shame for not understanding, I don't think I'm dumb. How come everybody thinks I'm stupid? And when a rupture in relationships, like a suspension in school, happens, a lot of time that's the beginning of a very significant downward spiral. And there's a lot of kids out there who do not recuperate or recover from that. So I really wondered, what was it about? Why did you put that in there? And it was beautifully done that you did that, because it will give people a sense of hope that when they see their child struggling like this, there are some clear things that we can do to help them heal and grow out of that. So what was going on in your mind when you decided to build that part of it, that part of the book, write that part of the book?
Well, I just wanted to give it as a gift to whoever reads it that might be struggling with this issue, to show them that they're going to run into bumps in the road, and maybe they will shut down for a while, and that is okay. But then eventually you have to get back up and figure it out. Now, luckily, my character Jamie Ireland is very based. Her family's very supportive, and so kind of helped her figure out what her verve is. And everybody has verve, and I just want to help children figure out what it is that their verve can be. And maybe by reading this story, it'll help launch their imagination into what they could do to think outside the box.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we'll leave your earlier reference to pie. We'll leave it there, and
Mystery.
yeah, let them read the book to find out what that really means. Well, we'll certainly hope that we get this book in front of Oprah someday. I think it's a great book, and I wish you a lot of success. So I've got two more questions for you, and I don't know which one to ask you first. I think maybe I'm going to ask you this. Going through what you went through is extraordinarily challenging, and it can be draining, and it can be just extraordinarily painful. How do you, and so many of the people that I just talked to a mom yesterday who is really feeling isolated, really feeling alone, and really feeling very concerned about her child's future. So this is a marathon, not a sprint. So how do you take care of your own heart and soul? How do you take care of yourself so that you have the wherewithal to continue on, particularly during those very difficult times?
Yeah, that's never been a problem for me. I'm really good at taking care of my heart and soul. And so one thing I love to do is art. I wouldn't, it's even hard for me to consider myself an artist. It's hard for me to give myself that permission to call myself, but I really am an artist. And so, I reinvented the space in my house that used to be a living room, and I turned it into an art studio for myself. And so I'll go in there and doodle and whatever and just work out my problems that way. But also a network of people are so important. And those people don't necessarily have to be other people that have children with learning disabilities or learning differences, but it does help to have a great group of friends that you can bounce ideas off of and that aren't going to think that, because a lot of moms, they want their kids to be the best, and they're always bragging about how wonderful their kids do. But I sometimes felt intimidated by that because my kids were having a lot of struggles. So I tried to surround myself with people who were similar to me, that maybe had children that were having struggles themselves. And so we each helped each other.
Mm-hmm. And what about your spouse?
My spouse loves to work, so he's just works all the time. But he's a great dad, and he has found something to do with each child to connect with them, whether it be sports or traveling or whatever. So he loves to do that with them.
Good. Well, the last question is kind of intertwined with the second and last question. So, is there a final key lesson that you would impart to our parents who are listening and their young kids who are struggling with dyslexia and other learning issues? What's the key kernel that you want to leave them with?
Well, one thing that I learned from my writing teacher, my writing coach, Maureen Ryan Griffin, was whenever you make a mistake, and try this at home with your kids, whenever they make a mistake, instead of getting all upset about it, throw your arms above your head, that lets oxygen get into your lungs, and just say, how fascinating. And I think if you do that, it just kind of frees up everything. Like, okay, so I made a mistake. It's not the end of the world, and we'll get through it. And so that is really one key thing that I would like to say that has really helps reframe things. Is just don't get stressed out about a mistake, because mistakes do happen, especially spelling mistakes if you have dysgraphia. So you can't get all worked up about it. But I would also say to parents, work on strengthening your children's strengths, because some of the learning issues, they're going to always be there and you can't overcome them. I mean, you can tweak them and make things easier, but find what your child's good at and strengthen that strength. I mean, for me personally, recently, my daughter and I started raising chickens. And the life lesson in raising these chickens from 2 days old and having to care for them, I can't say how tremendous it is. And sometimes I feel sort of like a genius as I come up with these ideas. But then I look back and say, there's no way I could have known. But maybe my intuition, going back to that pediatrician, maybe my intuition is my strongest strength. So strengthen their strength, find out what they love. Don't push them into, like my oldest with the strabismus. I knew he could never do sports. I knew that wasn't going to be a possibility, but he loved history. So I got him involved in the coin club in town. And he was, the only kid there among a bunch of 70-year-old men. And they all took him under their wing and gave him gifts that I could have never given him, by the things they taught him and showed him, and grew his love for history through collecting coins.
Boy, that's what a great gift. You're a great mommy.
Well, thank you. I love being a mom, and I never thought I would be a stay-at-home mom. I always thought I was a business major, so I always thought I was going to be a career mom. I was just talking to a friend the other day. She said, "Oh, I always thought I was going to be a stay-at-home mom till I tried it, and I couldn't do it." So I was the opposite. I always thought I was going to have a career, and I did as a mom, and I fiercely advocated for my kids, but also didn't be obnoxious and push myself there. I just did what was needed, I think.
Well, I think that's a great way to finish for today. I want to thank you, Lisa Rose, for joining us today and imparting your wisdom with us. And I think it's been a wonderful opportunity. So thank you.
And thank you very much. Your program is awesome. I think you have an awesome message for parents.
Well, thanks. Okay, now in the next week or so, I'll be announcing our next guest for our show, From Suffering to Success. If you have someone you'd like to hear on the show, please let me know. And if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to reach me at Dr. Michael Hart at gmail.com. And be sure to sign up for my free newsletter at drmichaelhart.com. Thanks much, and we'll see you next time.